school system has moved 6 years ahead, and it has been pushed ahead due to the pandemic. Very brave teaching community has adopted whatever methods they could find at that point to continue educating, to continue to enable their children to learn. And I think now eventually the phobia of using technology in the classroom has gone down tremendously. And we are open to exploring and adventuring with new technologies. However, at the same point, what we need to understand is the survival strategies are not necessarily the best growth strategies. So what we did 6 months back when we were struck by shutdowns is we tried to figure out the best survival strategy for our school. We pounced upon whatever technologies were recommended to us, whatever technologies we found were suitable for our budget and for our school, and we picked up those technologies. Moving forward, I think we will have to relook at the entire spectrum once again and figure out the right sustainable strategy. And at the core of that strategy is going to be the shift in pedagogical methods, because technology is just an enabler. If we continue to deliver face-to-face pedagogies using technology, using Zoom, using videos, then we are only using 5% of our capabilities of blended learning. So it's not about me teaching mathematics on a board and then taking a video to transmit that to students. I think we have to learn the better pedagogies that we need. And to address this topic, we have with us two of the most internationally renowned and experienced school leaders. We have with us Mr. Pramod Mahajan, who's joining us from Sharjah Indian School, which, by the way, a lot of you might not know, is the largest CBSE school, as he told me when we were visiting Switzerland together. And he is in charge of 18,000 students. And I don't think there is any campus that I've heard of where 18,000 students are studying. So this is the largest CBSE school, guys, and we have the most experienced person with us, joining us from Sharjah. So thank you so much. We also have with us Dr. Sarvesh Naidu. He's a doctorate in education from US, and he has had an illustrious career in education spanning almost 30 years. 42 years. मैं आपकी उम्र घटा रहा था, आपने बढ़ा.
नहीं, मैं उम्र दिखा रहा हूँ ना.
So 42 years in education, and he's currently the executive director of Pathways Schools. And Pathways has been known to integrate technology right from the time when they were conceived and when they were, when they started. I think they were if I remember correctly, Pathways was the first school to start providing tablets to children when they joined school. So they have been using technology for a long time, and therefore they have been using blended learning pedagogy. So I welcome both of you.
Thank you.
I would request is if you could take a few minutes and make your opening comments. Let me start with Mr. Pramod Mahajan, our international guest, and then I'll come to you. So Atithi Devo Bhava. Pramodji, all yours for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah. Good evening and good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be with the renowned platform Friday at 5, and we'll take forward the discussion, the blended learning pedagogy. Any pedagogy or anything which is to be good or will be good if and only if the teachers are taking it seriously. The thing is, no one can replace the classroom teaching and the teachers. But yes, teachers have to be well equipped Today's topic, the blended learning pedagogy. Blended learning actually nothing. It's an approach which blends together the online education resources, opportunities, techniques, tactics, strategies with the traditional pace-based, class appropriate, subject appropriate, age appropriate classroom teaching to ensure the child-centered teaching learning process with complete academic ownership of students. So the blended learning is one which ensures the complete academic ownership for a student. Blended learning is that pedagogy which empowers teachers to unlearn, learn, relearn, and transform with respect to the proactive classroom teaching. If you take technologically, the blended learning pedagogy technologically ensure unskilling, skilling, reskilling, and upskilling of a teachers to be a futuristic learning process. Not only the teachers, but the blended learning empowers the schools also, or we can say the learners also, to be independent learners. It provides ways and means to the students to ensure their metacognitive skill. The blended learning ensures that learner will be a project-based learner, learner will be a research-based learner, learner will be a risk taker. Blended learning pedagogy supports schools to be a knowledge hub, to be a scaffolding center, to redesign the overall personality of the 21st century learners. This blended learning, this technique actually ensures schools to be flexible learning platforms. Now, when you say flexible, in what way? This pedagogy ensures that what learners want to learn, when they want to learn, where they want to learn, why they want to learn, and how they want to learn. This pedagogy ensures the enjoyment of the learning process. If this pedagogy is implemented in the classroom, no doubt it will be a joyful learning. So what I mean to say, the blended learning is that pedagogy which empowers teachers to be a futuristic one, which ensures that the students to be proactive and independent learner, which ensures that the school to be the knowledgeable hub and the platform which provides learners to be independent and to own their academic ownership. If you consider in a different way, the blended learning pedagogy actually moving the teachers from sage on a stage to guide on a site and provides the path to a teacher to be a scaffolder instead of academic teacher, academic leader, or even a guide. So that scaffolding process actually is required. Now, another concept is, as we all are aware, these 21st century learners, they don't want to repeat those concepts which they have already learned. They want to learn something which they are not knowing. What I mean to say, these 21st century learners want to answer those questions which are yet to be asked. They want to think about those technologies which are yet to be invented. They wanted to explore those problems which are yet to be rise. So for that, they have to be beyond. For them, even the sky should not be limit. And in that scenario, the well-defined weapon for the teacher is blended learning, to the student is blended learning, and for the school is blended learning. That's my prima facie inputs on the topic.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you have very nicely, explained what blended learning is and what are some of the benefits of it. And one of the big questions, Dr. Naidu, when you addressed, is that what do you feel? A lot, I have a question from Neeta Mukherjee from Nagpur, and she's asking, what is the future of blended learning? Will it continue after the pandemic is over? And I think that's one of the doubts that some people might have. That is the blended era here to stay, or is it going to disappear with COVID? So over to you, Sarveshji. Please take it from here.
Okay, good. Thank you, and good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Um, I'll start with a little bit of 30 seconds lead into this aspect. And since we see Pramodji with a wonderful background with the sea in his background, and he's sitting in Sharjah, when they were hitting those sixes in the Sharjah Stadium, they still are. Kevin Peterson, one of the commentators, was asked by a fellow commentator that will we have to rewrite the manual, the coaching manual for cricket, looking at the way the game has evolved. And Kevin Peterson, who's been a very established cricketer in his own right, made a very simple statement. He said, I don't think we have to rewrite the manual. We have to add a chapter to the manual, which will bring in the aspects that have come into the new aspect of cricket. And I think in education, that is really what also comes in. So the question, is blended learning temporary? Is it just a COVID scenario? Not at all. It was there before also. Many schools were putting that into practice. So it's not new. It's just that the buzzword has become more common these days. But just try and think as educators. For me, there are 4 learning styles, first of all. One is the visual, then is the auditory, the listening, then is the tactile, the feel, and the touch and whatever. And then is the kinesthetics, not just the mind and the eyes, and the tongue, but the entire body comes into the learning process and thing. And when you look at it, most things we learn in life or do in life come under these 4 categories. And that is what is evolving in our influential in our personality and in the individual preferences. Each one of us has individual preferences, and we go by that. Now, Howard Gardner, when he came up with the different learning styles and the concept of it, it wasn't new. He just tabulated, and he tried to emphasize that not everyone learns. For example, you look at it today, most forms of assessments are written. You write and you assess. But what if there's a wonderful verbal person who's not very good at writing, but verbalizes very well? Or someone who can express this in a dance form or put it to music in a lyrical form and things like that. Do we give any credit to that? No, because we think that's a detached subject, that's a waste of time. So these things have changed. And really what has happened now is that the whole shift in the modern day learning has gone from the teacher, or is going very rapidly. Look, the teacher can never be replaced. But I think the way we have to approach it is there. Just like Pramodji said, from becoming a sage on the stage, you're becoming a guide by the side. Really, that's really what the most important thing is. So let's identify 2 or 3 important things that have happened. One, the shift is happening rapidly from teaching to learning. And tomorrow's learner is not going to be half as dependent on you for content. They're not. They will be dependent on you and their peers for interpretation and looking at it from different angles. We've now got tired of that discussion whether the glass is half full or half empty. That's cliched. Now you look at it from different ways. And a kid who touches it will say, oh, it's hot, or oh, it's cold. And a bright spark will turn around and say, no, there's air in it. The top half has air in it. And someone will try and use a scientific term and so on. Each one has a different way of looking at the same thing. The second thing is that there's a shift, and it is getting more and more learner driven. For a very long time, the learning was happening because it was custom made, whether it was to make clerical staff, certain administrative staff, factory driven requirements, and so on. But in today's time, the innovations are so high that the learners are saying, come on, hold it. Why am I learning it in the first place? What's the relevance of it? So you have to connect what you're doing with the real world around you. So actually, to use 3 terms, from pedagogy, which is teacher-centered, peda, teaching children in a certain style. It had already moved on to what is happening in the universities with andragogy. That is more of self-directed learning. The professor's there taking you in a certain direction, but you are doing a lot of research work and you're directing in your. And now the third concept, which is becoming so strong, which is linked with blended learning, is heutagogy. And heutagogy is learner driven, not learner directed, but learner driven. I want to learn this. I want to learn it in this way. Can you guide me? Can you help me? That's why you're a guide by the side. Is self-determined learning. So what is blended learning? Blended is not just a combination of online course, learning at home and learning in the school and things like that. That is definitely important. One of the most important offshoots of blended learning is the flipped classroom. And COVID and the online learning has taught us that. Students have become very adept at resourcing information. And we all know that most of the time the textbooks really get outdated and they're one-sided. Whoever the author is a biased way of presenting it. And we are finding that more and more in history now. A lot of the history was presented from the eyes of the British. And a lot of the Indian angles were completely left out, and our generation is oblivious to that. But not the youngster. He can go onto the net and look at 10 different angles of how the same thing is interpreted. So the idea of the flipped classroom is you do a certain amount of reading and research at home, and you come back into the classroom and you share. You discuss, you give your viewpoint with your friend, with the groups, with the teacher, and you bounce it off. It's no different from what we do in a meeting. We don't go into a meeting unprepared. It'll never be successful. You go into a meeting by way of having done your homework, preparation, presentations, everything at home. And then in the limited time you have 15 seconds, half a minute, 1 minute, 3 minutes, you've got to make a hit of it. All right. And people have to really blend to it. So that's what a flipped classroom is, that you come into the classroom to interact and bounce it off each other. This is what we're doing right now. We are actually doing a flipped classroom concept by now. When we open it out to Q&As, the participants are not just sitting there. They also have ideas. They also have a thought process. They have something to contribute, and we will look forward to that. So to conclude this first initial stage, we have to understand now that the blended form is not just using technology and the textbook. That's not just blended. Blended has become a whole new approach. And honestly, it will never go back 100% to the old system. It will go back to some extent. But even I think the assessment forms and the assessment norms will have to change because the children have started enjoying being exposed to a world of learning out there. And if you take that joy out of their learning and go back to just instruction, this is in the books, this is what will come to the exams, then I don't think you'll have many takers. They'll do it because they've got to do it. They've got to appear for exams, but they won't find classrooms exciting. And they will find the blended approach really the most exciting to go. And I think I give credit to all educators. February, March, most people were not even using technology other than PowerPoint presentations, a little bit of audio and things like that. And today, just look at the way you can research and come up with answers. As I'm speaking, people can go into the handset and come up with 20 different ideas as to what it is and things. So it's a very exciting way forward. And I think artificial learning is going to play a great way. So will that replace us as human beings? Not at all. Artificial intelligence cannot bring emotions. It cannot bring passion. It cannot bring various other human angles into the whole thing. The combination of the heart and mind, the combination of the five senses and the sixth sense of what is right and what is wrong, what is necessary, what's not, will never be replaced by artificial intelligence. It's going to be the blend, which is going to be the mantra of the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naidu. I think you've put it very, very clearly as to what we should be looking ahead in the future. And you're absolutely right that it's the learner and the diversity of the learner and the learning styles are going to play a huge role in defining the next level pedagogy. And I could not agree with you more with your example of cricket, that we're just adding one more chapter. So it's not really rewriting everything that we have been doing so far, but we need to extend that knowledge, extend that learning to newer areas, and to satisfy the learning needs of the next generation. And
absolutely, Atulji, just to
yeah,
add one sentence, what Kevin Peterson also pointed, the same analogy you're giving. He said, if you see the people who are scoring the most runs are the people who are hitting the ball with the basics
right,
in
right,
place. They're not shutting their eyes and slogging away.
absolutely.
There's a style of hitting the ball and there's a correctness in there that will never go away from cricket. This is
Right.
how
So
you'll adapt it.
the foundation has to be strong,
Absolutely.
and we have had a very good foundation in our teaching community, and now we just need to bring two more floors to it and make a larger building, and that would change some perspective. So I think very
Yes.
well said. There are a lot of questions, but before that, I want to take a quick.
Atulji, before that, one
Yes,
point
yes,
I want to add.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's some 12 years before I was there at the City Montessori, and we were having the video conferencing with regarding the multiple intelligence with the Howard Gardner. And that time I remembered I asked him a question, sir, now it's the age of artificial intelligence and blended approach, because it was started from those 10, 15 years before. What is the future of your, multiple intelligence? So the what answer he has given, it's very relevant for today's topic. He said, see, whatever you do, multiple intelligence will remain the base. And on that base, using AI, using blended approach, and using virtual reality and all, the learners can jump in such a manner that even the sky is not a limit. What I mean to say, before the COVID, whatever happening, during the COVID, now it is BC, DC, and AC. Now, before the COVID is BC, whatever is happening. During the COVID, whatever is happening, it will remain blended after the COVID also. So BC and DC will get blended for AC.
For AC. So that's a good terminology we need to remember. So let's get ready for AC. And let me see how many of our teachers are actually, so we have close to 400 participants. I will do a quick poll just to get your views. So you get 15 seconds to finish it. It's a very simple poll. In 2025, would you be using online learning for your students? Most definitely, most probably, probably not, definitely not. Okay, so great. So we have poll results coming in. Just pick up one.
Can't click. It's not clicking, I think.
Well, the panelists are...
No, we are not allowed to vote?
Well, your vote, we know where it's going to go, so that will create a...
we to be neutral.
Yeah,
we are neutral.
We are neutral. So it's the beauty is, if you can see the poll, I'm going to end the poll now. So we have, and that's the results. If you now see the results, what we see is 57% of the participants of this webinar feel that in 2025, they'll be most definitely using online learning. And 38% feel most probably they'll be using it. And only 5% of the people feel that they might not be using it. Now, that could be situational, that could be contextual in some way. But if I can give you one feedback, is that the 5% need to also gear up, because chances are they will be using it. 100% of schools, 100% of teachers would be using it. In fact, this week, Prasar Bharati has signed an MOU with the Electronics and IT Ministry, where they are going to be launching 51 educational channels, and 12 of these channels are going to be dedicated to class 1 to 12 of NCERT textbook. So there is, and that's going to be 24/7 free channels to make sure that some way, even the remotest village is connected. The child there has access to good quality teachers and content. So if at the ground level, there's going to be so much digital content being provided to our students, you can imagine what students and parents would expect from a good private school. They would expect, obviously, a lot more than that. And then blended education is going to be the expectation of the parent and also the student. So we will definitely be using it. Let me pick up some questions. I think, I don't know if that's Mr. R. Tandon or Miss R. Tandon, but if you can hear me, you can ask your question. You had put up a question.
Good evening, sir. It's Rupika Tandon, and I have used only R. First thing, let me thank you for this enlightening session, especially Mr. Naidu. There were a few terms which I missed out. I wrote it and then I thought I'll be Googling it later on. So coming to my question, there's a lot of talking about blended learning and we say it is there to stay. 100% agree on that. And then NEP is also there. So don't you think there has to be some sort of framework which should be given to the, or some pointers given to the schools that, see, this is the basic necessity which you all have to take in so that you are ready for the 21K learner. This is what earlier we said, there has to be a classroom, there has to be a teacher, there has to be benches, there has to be a chalk and a duster. No, okay. So the framework has to be more.
Right. So your basic point is what are the kind of guidelines that schools?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Or if they are not given, then what should the school do, right? So let's assume that we don't want to be dependent on the government to give us the path, and we want to create our own path. So what should a school do, right?
Yeah.
So Pramodji, you want to take that question?
Yes.
Okay.
Before taking that question, it's my humble submission to that 5% people. Better they should change themselves, otherwise future will definitely change them. Okay, now guidelines and framework. See, this 21st century era and the blended learning era, and keeping in view the independent learners, framework, planning, all the planning is only for no plan. What will be there by 2025? It's a big question mark. Because of the framework, there are many things get destroyed completely. What I mean to say, in engineering, they have given some framework. Whatever they learned in first year when they passed out the engineering, that is outdated. And who will provide the framework? It all depends. It is completely customized. It varies from student to student. It is a personalized aspect. So now, when we are talking about the personalized aspect, when we are talking about the use of technology or using the technology. Now, if you are using the technology itself getting changed day by day, as Dr. Naidu has told, shift is happening. So when the shift is happening, all these frameworks also, it's good for everything and good for nothing. So what I mean to say, a teacher has to upskill and reskill and transform in such a manner that whatever be the need and requirement of the society, of the learner, of the market, of the globe, has to transform and has to do accordingly. So basic framework is what? You should have the multiple intelligence skill. You should be techno savvy. You should be aware of how to use the technology, not to know the technology. When you are using the technology for getting the outcomes, your outcomes will be more. This is one thing. Second thing is, it is very well established fact that the learning outcomes will be maximum with minimum intervention. Hole in a wall. Yes. Already proved that thing. Minimum intervention. So minimum intervention means what? No academic bossing from any end. Neither to be bookish, nor to be schoolish, nor to be depending on the teachers. So what is required is, the requirement is technology, techno-savviness, technological aspect, blended pedagogy, blended learning, understanding the need and requirement of the future, enhancing the metacognitive skill, meta skills, creating the online resources, and using those resources effectively by using the technology. So the future is technology, platform is traditional. When I say traditional means, see, whatever you do, books will rock. Books are not our masters, but books are our helpers. So that will remain as a traditional platform. Another thing is technology will give you the way. Teachers will become a scaffolder. And then when a teacher is a scaffolder, will develop and will design own style, own framework, and getting it customized and doing the things in future. So that is my view on that.
So that's good, Pramodji. And in fact, when you've said, I have one question, and then Sarvesh, there's one more question that I want you to take up from Girish. So Sudhanshu, can you unmute Girish while I ask my question? And then the two questions are linked, so then Sarvesh can take both the questions together. So my question to you is that traditionally, when I started teaching mathematics in DPS Mathura Road in 1990, 1989, I think. One of the reasons why I enjoyed being a teacher at that young age, because I felt that I was the king of the classroom. So I was, that was my janta, and I was the ruler, and whatever I said had to be done in my classroom. And I think I was enjoying that control. I was enjoying that that power of a teacher in the classroom. And I'm very sure that maybe a lot of teachers might be enjoying that power and control over young people. Now, given that mindset that as teachers, we have evolved being the supreme of the classroom, the supreme leader and the person who controls everything, the blended learning would require us to give away this control. We'll have to pass on that control to the students and say that, look, you need to control your learning and we are going to be a facilitator. Now, how easy do you feel this mindset transition would be for most of the teachers in our system? So that is my question, but I want you to hold on to your answer and let Girish also ask you the question, and you can combine the two if you desire. Girish, want to go ahead?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. All I want to know is, sir, given the present scenario of our education system in our country, where spoon feeding is still practiced in most of the schools because we have a determined syllabus to complete within the time limit and lots of assessments to do. In such a scenario, how well our Indian students are prepared for heutagogy?
Good question,
Girish.
Good question. Let's look at a few aspects out here. How prepared are we to promote heutagogy? Actually, heutagogy has always been there. The only aspect is that we have assumed, so I'm going back to Atulji's thing of being the king of the classroom. All right. I think it is just defining the nature of the king that is shifting. The teacher is still the king of the classroom. But like Akbar had what? He had 9 jewels in his coat. All right. You have 20, 24, 30, 40, 50, 55, depending on the number of students you have in your class. You got that many jewels. And we have to first start accepting it is us, the educators, who have assumed that all children are alike. They're not. We have tried to follow the old education system, making them all alike. Because the earlier need for education was to produce more and more people almost on an assembly line. They had to be similar, army style. You've got to march and sink in the army. You can't produce individuals in the army. They will clash against each other and punch each other out of the marching area, first of all. So in education, if we start with that aspect, I don't think any education system is without a curriculum. All right. The curriculum is there and you are tied down by the curriculum and targets and times, and every curriculum does that. I think the most important thing to keep in mind is what is the objective? What is the intention of the school and the educator? And the next thing is what Pramodji has also used, what is going to be the learning outcome? Why are we educating children? For the past, the present, or the future? He's also covered that. I'm putting it in one statistical data, that it is a known fact that by 2035, 75% of the jobs that exist today are not going to be the same. So a lot of where we feel we are very competent, or our forefathers have been very competent, would not be relevant at all. There wouldn't be jobs for that competency. So there are three things to capture this aspect. What are the learning outcomes? One is the knowledge. Knowledge doesn't go anywhere. You've got to know it well. Can't be half-baked. Second thing is your skills, your ability to handle it. And the third thing is your attitude. How do you put it into practice? And in putting it into practice, what are your values, ethics? Listen, in our learning, we don't teach these things. We pick it up as we grow up. But children are craving to know, does it have an ethical value? Why is it being done this way when it's going to pollute the environment and all? And we don't have the answer because the only thing we say is it's in the textbook, it'll come in the exam, so you got to do it. But that's not the world they're going to grow up in. They want to understand what the world is going to be that they're going to grow up in. And so our learning outcomes have to be defined better. And the new education policy is doing that. CBSE is doing it. The ministry is doing that. And they're talking about it very strongly. They're not talking so much about a framework now as objectives and learning outcomes.
Thank you, Sarvesh. I think that's very well put. I hope, Girish, that answers your question. I have Uma Mohandas. Uma, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah, so what's your question?
Okay. So I had posted my question. My question was when Sir was talking about blended learning.
Right.
You know, it is a flipped classroom. So we generally say that, okay, and we have actually in my school and my teachers and we have been doing that throughout these past 6 months, that get the children to do some research, and then when we have 40 minutes of FaceTime on Zoom or on MS Teams, we do the discussion. And subsequently, it was also discussed that there is a mindset about mathematics particularly, that it has to be taught to the children and they are not given enough time to assimilate, to reason out, to find out how things, by the way, I'm not a maths or a science person. I'm more of a social studies and language person. But since I'm a principal of a school, I have to guide all my teachers also. So how do we get children to do research on mathematical concepts? And then when you come to class, you have a discussion. Do you solve those problems? How do you solve those problems? How do we make it more real in the blended world?
Great. So I Uma, loved your question because...
You got Atulji, who's a maths teacher, and he'll answer that.
So that is the reason, Sarvesh, I picked up her to ask the question because I knew iska answer mujhe pata hai. Okay, so I'll tell you, as a mathematician, I could not be happier that we are now going to start moving ourselves to a more learner-centric environment. The way we have been teaching mathematics in our school system, I am going to use a very strong word, but it's pathetic. It's almost similar to us saying that I can learn to play cricket by watching Sachin Tendulkar play cricket. Yeah. I can learn to play basketball by watching Michael Jordan play basketball. And that's what we have been doing with mathematics. A typical mathematics class would involve a teacher solving a lot of questions on the blackboard in an average school in India. And the children would be copying those notes, and then they will have to go back home and do similar questions like a monkey without thinking. So what we are doing is we are actually, pushing them to procedural mathematics rather than thinking mathematics.
Yes. And
I think that's the problem that we have faced in India's education system for a very long time. Mathematics is just as a subject, I'm giving you an example. Mathematics is just a tool to solve real world problems. And learning mathematics starts from identifying a problem, whether the problem is waste management, whether the problem is any societal problem, whether it's an environment problem, migration of birds. So you look at any of the real world problems, no matter how small or big it is. And when you start analyzing it, you need data. You need to start creating curves, graphs, shapes, etc. all mathematics can only be learned by solving problems. And these are not, I'm not talking about NCERT textbook problems. So the moment we inculcate the problem solving pedagogy in its right spirit into our classrooms, mathematics would be as big a joy as Netflix for any student. And I think that is something that we need to aim at. It's going to take some time because most of the math teachers are also product of a system which taught them mathematics in the wrong manner. So it's going to take some time to do that, but that has to be done. And I hope, Uma, I've answered your question slightly. I would welcome any Sarvesh or Pramodji to add to
I just
this.
wanted to add one more thing. You've captured it so well. If you look at our own schooling, if you're my generation, you were doing pound, shilling, and pence at the end of the 60s because the British system was there. The Indian system hadn't come. Then we turned decimal. And all our mathematical calculations, which pertain to money, was all in rupees and paise. All right. How many maths teachers open it out and say, all right, we're going to do 10 problems, but in 10 different currencies. So simultaneously, we're also going to educate ourselves in that. Most of the time, we are only looking at the end of the journey, and we're not giving enough credit to the journey itself. But you and I know that most great things on this planet have happened because people have tried, experimented, failed, and retried.
Yeah.
It's the learning, unlearning, relearning kind of a concept which Pramodji was also talking about.
Yes,
And
yes.
we don't give credit to that because we're only looking, is your answer right or not? No. What about the person who's thought very innovatively and come up with it, looking at it from a totally different angle? Are there marks reserved for that? Even if it's complete trash and think, but it's a creative thing. That's how people are creating the futures with their apps and their businesses and various other things. They're trying out new things rather than repeating the same thing that has existed.
And
So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, and I think that's the strength of blended learning, because that era of matching the answer to the back of the book, okay,
Yes.
and then feeling good about it because I got the same answer.
Yes.
I think is the worst way to learn math because solving a math problem is a journey. Okay, you think about it. What you're thinking is more important than getting the right answer. And I would give more credit to a guy who has innovatively thought about the solution.
Yes.
Maybe even if it's wrong, I don't care. Maybe it's the wrong answer. But the quality of thought that has gone into it should be given credit. And that will happen with blended learning coming in, where we give freedom to children on how they want to learn and what they want to learn. And I think that's very important. Let me take up one more question.
And also, sorry, just to add, and looking at it, what different answers.
One more
Different
point in
answers.
that.
What are the different possible options?
It's beyond the thinking process. How consistent logically you are. That is the mathematics nowadays.
Yes.
Whether it is correct, whether it is wrong, whatever the solution is, what is the most appropriate and most probable solution, most appropriate solution, and how logically consistent that solution is. That is the mathematics. Otherwise, till the time, what the maths teachers were doing, they were teaching them the manipulation and calculation. Now those era has gone. Now it's an era of logical consistency. And because of that, the maths teachers will not be the king of that class, but will become the emperor of that class if they use the blended techniques and all.
Yes, and I think the same effect will happen in other subjects. At some point,
Absolutely.
we will. So I think yes, mathematics is one subject, but the same thing will happen in all other subjects. So what we need to understand is maybe at a later stage we'll have Friday at 5 sessions focusing on pedagogy of each subject so that we can dig more into detail. I have some more good questions. Let me pick it up. Meeta Bandula, are you there? Okay, Meeta, your question. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, Dr. Atul. My question to the learned panelist here is that blended learning is a wonderful idea. I agree. And it's a very good way of guiding a child to self-explore, self-research. But don't you think we educationists should come up with some blended assessment techniques?
Yes.
So
Yes.
until we
Yes.
children in a multi-dimensional way. So they will not take blended teaching or the innovative way of teaching more seriously. So I think we should also come up with some multi-dimensional assessment system, pen and paper test only. We give a lot of like weightage to other ways, as rightly said by Dr. Naidu, that a student may be more good in verbal expression, a student may be more good in different style of presenting his knowledge. So I think we should also think about coming up with a blended assessment system.
Absolutely, Meeta. And I think Akhilesh Singh also has asked the same question. What about the changes in the assessment techniques? So, Pramodji, you have do assessment for 18,000 people,
Yes,
every few days. So,
Yeah.
what would you advise what we should do?
See, blended pedagogy is the complete solution of everything. So now the assessment process, we don't assess the child what the child is knowing. If you are assessing that one, what the child is knowing, you are doing nothing actually. You are helping the child to mug up and omit in the examination. What we do, we challenge the child that, okay, how to design uh, this device which will reduce the power factor. So they come up with the various solution.
Yes.
And then at that time we allow them to use any guide, any book, net, Google Auntie, whatever you want to use it. And then they come up with the creative answer and innovative answer. So that is the blended assessment. Don't assess the child for what which you have taught him, for what which he mugged up, for what he know already. You have to assess the child by challenging the next level. Let me cite one example. When they were doing this Mangalyaan, in India, so the main hurdle was the availability of the finance. So what they did, they asked this question to all the students, and they have organized some small science fair that designed a Mangalyaan, which can be utilized for a very cheap cost and all. And they got the pathway to construct that thing, and using those techniques they did that thing. So what I mean to say, if you challenge the child, if you assess the child properly, if you ask the correct question, proper question to the child, you will get the fertile answer, and that is actually the assessment. And using those answers, they could construct the Mangalyaan, which is as cheaper as the auto rickshaw is. So see, such type of miracles can happen when you assess them properly. And that assessment is asking the right question. And that right question should be a balance in the closed-ended and the open-ended, and more to be giving the variety of ways to find out the appropriate solution, the most appropriate solution, and the most feasible solution. So if we do that assessment, actually it makes a sense. Now, using blended learning, and you asking the child, state and write Newton's laws of motion. What is the use? It's nothing. You have to, when you are using blended learning or those pedagogy, you have to ask them how you will derive the Newton's third law using the Newton's second law. And then why the force, why the friction is not a force? Why the friction is not an unbalanced force? Why it is a balanced force? So if you are asking such type of questions, if you are doing the assessment with this way, the result will be good, outcome will be good, and the students will remain engaged. The blended learning pedagogy is meant for engaging the student in a better way, engaging the student more with proper assessment. The answer of that question is yes, blended assessment is the way to challenge the child and to get the things done and to keep them more engaged. The funda is you make them busy or they will make you busy.
Excellent.
So making them busy is the blended learning tool.
I think I'll change the word from making you busy, they'll make you miserable. So I just wanted to add, Atulji, in 30 seconds. I think the most important thing we have to understand is that there is no curriculum and schooling system which tells you cannot innovate and do assessment and certain things, learning outcomes in the way you want to do it. It is only for the board exams that you have to conform to a certain aspect. All right. So up to grade 8, the schools must have the courage. Now the schools will have the courage if the teachers don't look and get obsessed with the idea, am I the king or the emperor of my class? You will automatically become the king or the emperor if the entire population is with you.
Absolutely.
All right? You will be the king. There's no, they'll come running for your class. They'll never miss a class because they find they are a part of it. And these days answers you can get from anywhere, and calculators and computers and reference areas are doing. Now, I'll just give you one quick example. I was horrified when some years ago I was interviewing someone for geography and for a position in geography. And I had the atlas in front of me and I said, okay, come on, use the atlas. And I came up with certain concept. And the teacher started crying. I said, what happened? She said, I'm sorry. But I said, you got a master's in geography. She said, I have never used an atlas and never been made to use an atlas in my entire education process.
Wow. Wow.
And had a master's degree in geography. That answers, I think, to great extent where we go wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I have time for only 2 very short questions and short answers. So Medha, before you ask your question, I'm going to read out Rashi's question. How will blended learning be made feasible in the context of schools with a decent budget? So I think she wants to know whether transformation to blended learning would require a lot of investment from the schools side. And the second question is going to be by Medha. Medha, can you unmute yourself, please?
Good evening, all. Yeah, my question is, when we are talking about the blended learning and we're talking about the teacher should be techno savvy, she should know the technology, then what exactly in the technology she should learn, or she should be updated herself, and who takes up that ownership basically?
Okay.
My initial reaction straight away is the ownership has to be taken by the teacher. You never cease to be a learner. A teacher who ceases to be a learner is not going to be a functional teacher in the future. You have to keep growing with the changing times. The second question is about the budgets. See, when the safety issues came up in schools, all the schools had to go in for cameras and installing lots of gadgets and all, which they didn't have earlier. Somehow the other schools find the budgets. It's just a shift in priority. I think we find it. And parents will also respond. They will be less resistant to fees and all those sort of things if they understand that it is going for the betterment of their child's learning. And think schools have to work in that direction. It won't happen easily. It won't happen automatically, but you need to do it. And so we have to move in that direction. There is no looking back. I'm not one of those fans who says technology and nothing else. Not at all. Not at all. Whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% is a matter of priority. And the human element cannot be replaced. I'm repeating that again. It cannot be replaced and should not be replaced. We all live on this planet happily because of the human element. Keep that alive in your schools.
Great. Sounds good. So, Medha, I want to point out to your answer. ICSL is doing one of the training programs for teachers, and the focus areas that we have in that training program are actually 4 areas. Where we talk about technology, where we talk about the blended learning pedagogy. And then one very important aspect is developing relationships with students, because research has shown that teacher-student relationship has a direct impact on student achievement levels. So we look at that, and we look at how to do assessment using technology and what is the right kind of assessment also, as Pramodji had mentioned. So with that, what I'm going to do is, we are almost at the end. It's 5:54. I'll ask each of my guests to give their closing statement for about 90 seconds, 1 minute, 30 seconds, closing remarks, and then I'll wrap it up in the remaining 1 minute. So Pramodji, please go ahead, your closing remarks.
Yeah, teachers, they will be rocking, and no one can replace the classroom teaching as well as the teacher, but they have to be techno savvy. What will happen in future? The techno savvy teachers will replace the traditional teacher. So there is no threat for the techno savvy teacher, number 1. Number 2 is, It is not knowing the technology, but it is knowing how to use the technology. And that will be only and only is possible when you are using it. When you start using it, you will do the wonders. Third one is, once you have developed the platform, you can jump at a height. That is one thing. Financially also, once you have developed the platform, blended learning and all those AI, virtual reality and all, rather than it will save the money. It is saving the money. But once you have to provide the platform, one-time investment, and you can enjoy throughout the future. No doubt, the futuristic aspect is techno-savviness, technology, all these new approaches. For that, a lot of training is required. Lot of mindset shifting is required. It is not only the shift in technology, but thought process shifting is also must. And the teachers will not have any threat if they are scaling them, rescaling them, and transforming them. So that's my final comment on that. Teachers will rock the world, will be the queen or king or emperor, provided that they should be pedagogical leader, they should be technologically strong. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much. Sarvesh, over to you.
Okay, so, when we talk about a modern classroom, I'm just trying to define it, which is like a blended classroom. Anything you say modern, then immediately technology seems to come in the way. It's not true. Technology is a part of it. As Pramodji said, technology is here to stay, but how to use it effectively is the important thing. All right, and we all need to do it. And let's not forget, somewhere down the line, you all had to put a thing about digital immigrants versus digital natives. And the students are the digital natives. They almost seem to be born with technology in their hands when they are born. So we have to accept that. The next thing is that a modern classroom has to be dynamic and not static. It has to be active, not passive. And the final thing is, it has to be very interactive. Children today want to contribute towards the thought process. The world has always been and will continue to be about effective communication. Effective communication is a two-way process. What you say, how you say, when you say it, everything, all those WH questions are very important here, and you have to be very conscious of it. Because if you are not, then the communication is one-sided. It's a monologue. And children are not going to be prepared for monologues because they can get the answers from elsewhere much faster than what you said in the classroom. So they won't. So the modern classroom has to become, that's why the flipped classroom, prepare at home, that's your homework, come and talk and come and discuss. A disruptive classroom is not a bad thing in life. That's what good meetings are all about. But disruptive meetings are not that you're just shouting all the time. That's with our disruptive television channels. That's a different story, all right? They're not interactive. But classrooms can be very disruptive and a huge learning can happen because at the end of it, you measure the outcomes of it. What were the learning outcomes of this exercise? That is the mantra.
I think very well said. Learning outcomes are going to be the center of the focus in the new future. And I think the performance of teachers is also going to be measured based on how effectively they have achieved the learning outcomes or how effectively have they helped students to achieve the learning outcomes. And it's from the information age where teaching was about passing information. It's now about enabling students to become problem solvers, enabling students to start thinking, analyzing, and it's going to be, the focus is going to be mind rather than just attending the classroom and taking notes. I think that's the transition. We had a very, very wonderful session today for 1 hour. And I thank all of you, all 400 of you, 407 was the highest count that I saw. All of you to come here on Friday. I know a lot of you are repeat attendees, and I always welcome you. I wish you a very happy Diwali, but more importantly than that, don't go crazy. The COVID pandemic has not gone away. So please, no card parties, no big socials. Just make sure that you stay at home because it's very important for your students that you survive this COVID, and it's also important for us. And please stay safe, stay happy, and welcome back. And Noel, next week we're not going to have Friday at 5 because of Diwali. Diwali is on 14th and Friday is 13th. So we are cancelling that for the last 13 weeks, right? Or this is the 14th. This is the 14th week. Okay, so the Anshu just corrected me. For 14 weeks consecutively, we have been having this program. But because of Diwali, we'll not have it next week and we'll start the week after that. We are going to be talking about assessment in detail. So what we're going to do, we wanted to focus on pedagogy this time. And the next session is going to be purely focused on the new assessment. We'll talk about norm webs, depth of knowledge levels. We'll talk about how to even frame questions on critical thinking. And that's going to be very, very important. So do join us next week. Well, not next week, but next to next week. And we'll continue this conversation and go deeper into education. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming.